Yo, what is up, guys? It is your boy Skull and Bones 2 here, and in today's Gears of War E-Day video, we are going to be talking about a flashback mission to the Pendulum Wars featuring Carlos Santiago, Dom, and Marcus Phoenix. So, the reason I'm even making this video is because we did get a Pendulum sneak peek back in Gears of War 4 as one of the intro missions, and who's to say that we won't get another flashback mission for Gears of War E-Day, setting the precedent for the story going forward, depicting Dom and Marcus's relationship. Now, a lot of people are saying, oh, well, you don't have proof of this, and you're probably just talking out of your ass. The reason I'm saying this is because more than likely, just from what we've gotten in recent games like Gears 5 and Gears 4, the Coalition is not like Epic. They are not afraid to go back in time and tell stories that lay the foundations for the stories coming in the future. So I don't know why we wouldn't do that. It's kind of very made public knowledge at this point now that Carlos and Marcus are best friends, and Dom is a friend of Marcus, but he's just not as close. So we need to build to that relationship, and the best way to do that is to explain and show how Carlos died and how much that really affected Marcus and then Dom, and then building up to their brotherhood that we know and love from Gears of War 1 through 3. Now, I want to say that, yes, even though I've had hands-on from the campaign, there are things that I cannot speak about, but this is one of those things where I'm at liberty to make and just talk about because I feel like it is a good theory. And I will say, though, that I have not played any prequel missions. What we were given were more so middle of the act story modes. So I'm not really going to delve too much into that. You guys will just see it when it comes out. Other than that, diving into the lore, why and what will we see regarding Gears of War E-Day with the UIR and the Pendulum Wars. So I do think we're going to be going back to Aspho Fields. Literally, I talked about this. There were leaks in the game files talking about Aspho Fields. And if that's there, you know, multiplayer usually likes to take maps out of the story mode and campaign and implement them into multiplayer with its own spin. And I would not understand or, you know, see why the Coalition wouldn't put that game mode or why would they put that map in the game but not include any game modes built around it? And why would it just be in the game and not have a reference to something that we see in the campaign or story mode? So I do think we're going to be seeing, you know, the UIR. I do think that we will very likely see different types of UIR soldiers, different types of UIR weapons, different types of UIR vehicles, and technology. We know that the UIR is very technologically advanced, a little bit more so than the COG is at this time. That's just how the Independent Definitive Republics are in the books and in the lore. They are a very, very, very technologically advanced nation. It's why that they were such an adversary to defeat and fight during the Pendulum Wars. They were just very good, tactically speaking. And they kind of had a match for just about everything the COG had to throw at them. So you can understand why forcing their hand and putting them in a position like this, i.e. Operation Leveler, was so crucial to winning the Pendulum Wars. It was the only way that the Coalition could get a leg up on these guys. Unfortunately, we had to do the whole notion of stealing their weapons to make it our own kind of thing. So like I said, beginning this video, we're going back to Aspho Fields. We have it in the game files. It's there. Public knowledge at this point. But what will we see? Well, diving into that, I think we're going to be seeing the Pariah tank, the UIR's primary heavy battle tank. The UIR APC, yes, the UIR has its own version of the APC. It's a half-track armored personnel carrier utilized for frontline infantry transport. It also has, you know, turrets on it and a anti-personnel cannon. We will probably see the LAV, or light armored vehicle, their version of the pack horse. The ASP is a self-propelled anti-aircraft gun, or you'll see what the ASP looks like. It's like half-track mounted vehicle. We'll get the Chimera helicopter as well. We will get some UIR battleships and submarines. And I don't think we're really going to be doing anything regarding the UIR space rockets. They really did delve into the space program that the UIR had in Gears 5, but I really don't think that's that fundamental to Aspho Fields. Now, I know that the only way the Hammer of Dawn works is by getting satellites into space. So maybe we might see UIR space rockets docked, but nothing really going too in depth about them. So starting off with the UIR's version of the Raven, or their counter to the Raven, is the UIR attack helicopter known as the Chimera. It is based off the real-life Battle Hind, and it's very cool. Unlike the COG's design for the Raven, where it's an amalgamation of a bunch of different helicopters melded into one, the Chimera is basically just copy and paste. It's a Russian attack chopper, troop transport chopper. I like it. It's very unique looking. It's very cool. But there is another helicopter that the UIR uses for troop transport, just like how the COG had a specific helicopter that got phased out later on that was specifically used for troop transport, although this one, alongside the Chimera, was used during the entirety of the Pendulum Wars. Unlike the COG's vehicles, the UIR's vehicles, like the UIR troop transport helicopter, it was very sturdy and good for long-term use. A lot of their stuff, like I said, they were technologically advanced, and they were just very good at creating weapons and vehicles and making sure they were effective during wartime and lasting a long time. The next vehicle that I want to talk about is the Pariah tank. The Pariah tank was a counter to the Centaur, and you could argue that it was a bit more sturdier and a lot more powerful than the Centaur tank, but the one fatal flaw it had is that it had vents in the back, which easily allowed soldiers to drop grenades or Molotovs, which caused it to implode. The next vehicle that I want to talk about is the ASP. This was the anti-material or anti-air vehicle that the UIR used. They would use this as like a weapon to shoot down flying vehicles overhead. It was to keep the air clean. The next vehicle that I want to talk about is the APC, the UIR APC. We see it in Gears of War 5 for the first time, fleshed out when we go to Groznia. And we, really do see that it is just a fortified, more durable version of the COG APC. I'm not saying that the COG APC isn't as good, but in terms of protectiveness and utility, I'm pretty sure the APC that the UIR have does beat it. Unfortunately, it's much more armored. It looks like it can handle a little bit more terrain better than the COG's APC. So you can see that the UIR really did take a lot of things into effect. Although their vehicles look quite dated and old, they do serve a purpose and quite literally outmatch some of the COG technology and vehicles. It's just tried and true. I mean, the UIR really did favor protectiveness and lethality over, quickness and lethality, which was something that the COG liked to focus on. They did like to have protection, but they also did like to be fast, and that ended up biting them in the butt a little bit more times often than not. Another notable UIR vehicle was the LAV. It was a light armored vehicle, much more akin to the APC in a cross between the pack horse being very lightly armored and heavily armed. This was the go-to besides the armored APC for transporting quickly and safely. The next thing that I want to talk about are the UIR battleships and submarines. As we go to Aspho Fields, we will definitely see the Navy. The Navy is going to be pretty big in Gears of War E-Day, so I don't understand why we won't see the Navy in the flashback. We can see the NCOG and UIR battleships probably fighting. Naval assets used to project maritime power during global resource conflicts. We had submarines. We had naval airship carriers from the UIR. And like I said, we don't really got to talk about the space rockets. We know that the orbital space systems were used to early on set the groundwork for the Hammer of Dawn, but those plans were stolen, so I don't really think we're going to get any of that. We have some UIR patrol boats named the Amirali and the Amirali Enka, or also other patrol craft. I don't think we're going to be seeing any of these. Like, yeah, we might see some UIR patrol boats and stuff like that, but nothing notable like in the books and comics. So we've got, carriers, aircraft carriers, Navy vessels, Navy combat vessels, submarines, patrol boats. I mean, basically anything that COG had, the UIR was there to match. But I do have some actual in comic book pictures for what they look like. So for the aircraft carriers and naval fleets that had, cannons on them and anti-material cannons and stuff like that, this is what the ships look like. Although they did get obliterated by the Hammer of Dawn as a show of power by the COG, we do get a pretty good look at what the ships look like. We do actually have some video of what the ships look like back in like Gears of War 3. They did change, but we do also get a look at the submarines. The submarines that the UIR had were counters for the COG's submarines, the sea basses. So, like I said, the UIR was pretty much decked out in every category. They really did have a chance to match the COG in every facet. Now, we will be going to Aspho Fields, and I'm not too sure we'll be in the water as much. I don't know how, us arriving there is going to be, if the campaign's going to throw us in an existing battle. But nonetheless, back on the topic of submarines, the UIR actually had special submarines that were suicide bombers based off of religious cult in the UIR. The UIR would have these submarines go to certain Navy ports for the COG or targeting COG ships and They would suicide bomb these targets. Often, more likely than not, some of the crew members would chicken out last minute, and these submarines were welded shut, like the doors are welded shut. So if you decided to bug out of your assignment last minute, well, it didn't matter. You weren't going anywhere and you were going to die. Going back to the topic of ships, another famous UIR ship slash destroyer that we ended up coming to know of was in Gears of War Judgment, when it was on top of a hotel that we needed to use it to get to Marcus and Dom. There was another famous UIR Navy battleship, Frigate, or otherwise known as the Frigate. It was a UIR battleship that was conducting a lot of attacks. There was also the UIR tanker slash troop transport ship, which we got concept art of, but it was in the books and comics that it used to transport troops around the world, basically. Now, the UIR has an armament of weapons, most notably the GZ-18 Marks, a sniper rifle, Bushka grenade launcher, and the Mark I Lancer assault rifle slash retro lancer. So signature UR weapons were the Marksa or Marksa Mark I and GZ-18. It was a semi-automatic marksman and sniper rifle used for medium to long range combat. The Bushka was a grenade launcher. They also used the retro lancer and another machine gun called the UIR belt-fed machine gun. This was a common weapon used by the UIR that didn't really have a name to it before, so I will show you guys that. Now, the shared arsenal between the COG and UIR would have been the Mark I Lancer, pre-chainsaw bayonet era, and the MX-8 snub pistol and the Bolo smoke grenade. This was universally shared between both armies. Although they had special weapons designated to each faction, there were some components that were used more so than others. Now, going over the different marks of variants, the different weapons that may have not been talked about as much, we'll start off with the GZ-18 Marksa. This was the sniper variant in Gears Judgment that we get modified for very long-range combat. I would like to say this one was much more superior than the Longshot. The COG actually had to come up with a direct competitor to this weapon because they ended up making a marksman rifle that was semi-automatic to combat this one. It eliminated the use of bolt and chamber because of taking the bolt back, putting it, loading in the next round, and putting the bolt back forward. It just takes too much time when people were raining bullets by trigger fire and putting in a new magazine and cutting time on having to reload. It just defeated the purpose of using an effective sniper rifle, so that is there. The next important weapon I do want to talk about would have been the UIR KZ-12 IAW assault rifle. This was a heavy, bulky, I guess it was like a hybrid LMG slash assault rifle mix where it had a drum magazine that was connected to a belt-fed mechanism that consistently fired rapid fire rounds over a long distance. It had a leg up over the Retro Lancer just due to the fact because it had more ammo. And if you have more ammo, you can never stop firing. Now, another weapon that was religiously used by the UIR was this Gatling or chain gun that was usually found on top of vehicles, sandbags, or military checkpoints when holding down certain positions. You would most likely see another weapon that I'm about to mention here paired with this called the mortar. We got the mortar introduced in Gears of War 2, but it was a weapon that was shared between the COG and the UIR like many other armaments. This weapon and like the Gatling gun was used to prevent soldiers from getting to certain areas, giving area of denial. Essentially, the Gatling gun and the mortar were to prevent advances for enemy forces. So it was a very viable, heavy weapon that was used during the Pendulum Wars. Another weapon used by the UIR was a SMG. It looks like the Hammerburst and Gorgon pistol mixed together. It wasn't really talked about a lot, but you can kind of see how the Locust took parts of this and made the Gorgon pistol and kind of made it his own. There wasn't a lot of concept art or art in general for the gun, so I had to look and see if anybody had made a custom variant of it. The next thing that I want to talk about is the UIR's armor, and specifically what soldiers, classes of soldiers, and ranks will see. We know that the standard infantry grunt armor is this. This is their version of the standard COG armor. They would be met with different variations in armor. Like I know the UIR Sandswept was a byproduct of the environment. They would tailor or make custom armor compared to where they were. Non-armored combatants in the UIR would use just regular clothes and try and stay incognito. We got a glimpse of this. They were called nomads. They were still armed, but in the Goraznian desert and whatnot. Another UIR skin that's actually probably up there as my favorite would have to be the UIR Officer. Officers had a unique design. They had this cool cape. They had, utility on them, their antenna for communications on, their rank on the side. Very cool armor. You usually see these guys commanding squads of regular UIR grunts and being in very notable positions, guarding important locations, stuff like that. Now, a very unique version of the UIR, actually another favorite of mine, would have been the UIR Elite. The UIR Elite was the UIR's answer specifically to the COGS Commandos and more specifically the Onyx Guards. The UIR Elite were designed to combat the Onyx Guards because in the middle of the Pendulum Wars, or towards the beginning parts, they did not have a Special Forces faction dedicated to the special ops that the coalition of world governments had, i.e. the Commandos and Onyx Guard. So there's a cool little fact for that. Those guys were trained and had special weapons vehicles dedicated to that unit, specifically for combating COG Special Forces. Then we have Major Garen Paddock. Major Garen Paddock had unique armor that changed over the years in the games. They gave him different variations of the armor from when he was in the UIR fresh, and then when he came out of the UIR fresh after the war had ended in Judgment. And then we got to visit Paddock years after the Locust War, and he has all of his accommodations, medals, and his modified UIR armor. We know specifically that the UIR had this kind of like summertime armor, just like the Gears did in Gears of War 3, is mainly because Groznia is very hot. We know that there's like a lot of sand, you know, it's humid. You probably don't want to be wearing that full armor all the time. Although I know that the UIR armor is insulated and meant to keep their soldiers warm or hydrated and cool during specific weather. So it could have just been a personal preference thing, but Paddock has, you know, evolved armor over the years of his time in the UIR, and I think it's very cool. But other than that, this is your boy Skull and Bones 2 and 2. This was just a theory that I think we may see the UIR in a flashback in Gears of War E-Day, and these are the units, the vehicles, and weapons we could possibly see. Other than that, this is your boy Bones. I will catch you guys in the next one. I've got some banger videos on the way. So until next time, peace.